Mickey Loomis has given the Saints the dreaded vote of confidence. Not just the roster, but head coach Dennis Allen, too. All of you, not all of you, but a lot of you have said you want to see Dennis Allen fired. So what will happen, which is it, and how hot is Dennis Allen's seat? We will discuss here on the Saints Insider podcast for Wednesday, November the 29th. I'm Zach Ewing, Rod Walker, Matthew Paris, Jeff Duncan. The crew's all here, except for Luke Johnson. He's on the injured list with illness. So we'll welcome Luke back a little later. But right now, it's still a full house. And we're going to talk. We're going to talk a lot of stuff, guys. But I want to let you know first, the Saints Insider podcast is brought to you by Bank Plus. Their banking decisions are made here in New Orleans by local bankers who know the community and take the time to know you. From small business to big business, home loans to bank anywhere technology, Bank Plus is here for New Orleans. Learn more at bankplus.net. Also, encourage you to go to NOLA.com/Saints to read all of our coverage. Sign up for our newsletter at NOLA.com/Saints Insider and sign up for the YouTube channel, podcast, whatever form you want to listen to Saints Insider in. We appreciate you tuning in. All right, guys. I'd kind of planned on this talking about a referendum on Dennis Allen's job a little bit because that's been the talk of the town ever since Sunday's loss in Atlanta. And then this morning on WWL, Mickey Loomis goes on the radio and says, Dennis Allen has my full support. I think we have the right roster. I think we have the right coaching staff. We're going to turn this around. So the Saints are kind of living in their own little bubble, Doug.
Yeah, and I think it's frustrating fans even more, right? Because everybody's kind of out for blood right now. But I do understand a little bit. I mean, they aren't 2-9 or something. Right. They're 5-6. So, in understanding the history of how the organization works, and especially how Mickey Loomis operates, it's not surprising at all to me. And I'm kind of actually surprised the way Saints fans are reacting, knowing that Mickey Loomis has been in charge here for 2 decades, and this is always how he's operated. So I'm a little surprised that they're doing a little offensive work right now, going out and kind of already trying to head this off of the past. That's really unlike Mickey. Mickey likes to
offensive work.
Yeah, no, good pun, right? But no, I mean Mickey usually just ignores this, so they're obviously hearing it on Airline Drive, and so I think as we've seen in some of the rhetoric and some of the messaging from the building, including Dennis Allen on Monday, they're trying to emphasize the positives right now, and no one wants to hear that right now. So I think they're a little tone deaf, and internally, I'm sure they're trying to address some of these things, but at this point, as Rod and I both wrote this week, it's hard to have any confidence that something's going to get fixed. And I think that's why the fans are so upset, because they've seen the same problems recurring over and over again. Where's the confidence that these problems are not going to rear their head? Sure, they might fix it for a week or two, but the regression will occur again like it's been happening. So I understand fan frustration. I also think part of this frustration is born out of the long-term view of they don't see a way out of it long-term. Right. And I think that's really where the angst is coming from.
I think that's exactly right. I mean, in fact, Matt and I were talking before we started recording about, look, if Saints play the Lions on Sunday, they're underdogs, but they're not huge underdogs. I mean, it's not out of the question they could win that game. And if they win that game, then you follow that up with Carolina, with the New York Giants. You could be looking at a team that's 8-6 and is not only leading the division, but would be in the thick of the wild card race and has a legitimate playoff record. I think more the issue is not necessarily the situation this season is in, Matt, but the fact that these fans don't see it changing and don't see that inconsistency going away.
Right, and this is kind of what I'm working on this week, but the way that the Saints have constructed their roster, right, it's very all in on their veterans. Their salary cap situation is what it is. They've kind of gone all in on this. That's one thing to do, to go all in with Drew Brees. You have to capitalize on that window. It's another to do it with Derek Carr, and they've put so much money in there. And then also, Cam Jordan, Alvin Kamara. You can get out of Kamara's contract after this year, I think. But besides that, by relying on all these veterans, you need them to perform. And when they're not performing and they're still on these long-term deals, that's where it creates the pessimism and, what's the long-term vision here. And it's kind of harder to say that after this season or during the season.
For me, even on the short-term vision, though, you're just hearing the same things week after week, and we're gonna get it figured out. We just got to get better, and that's kind of what Alvin talked about after the game. He just kind of talked about it's time's up for us to keep saying this. We need to do it, and how do you do it? I don't know, and apparently they don't know either, and so that's why the fans are frustrated. I mean, they just don't see, like Jeff said, they don't see a solution to this long term, but I also think they don't see any solution to it short term. They just don't think there's anything that's going to come out of this positive.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I can sit here and say, oh, yeah, they could beat Detroit and then they're favored. I mean, does anybody see this team winning 3 games in a row? The consistency's just not there.
Right, and I think so the short term and the long term, look, all fans want is some hope. And they're grasping for some kind of hope, and they don't see it. They're very smart, and they understand, like, what the ramifications are. I think a lot of fans would have been happy with the potential of this team kind of blowing it up and just starting over, but that's not the route the organization went. They sold everyone on, we're going to win now. This roster's built to win now. We're going to go get a veteran quarterback. We're not going to draft a first-round quarterback. This is the direction we're going because we see a window with Tom Brady retiring that we can win the division now, and it's not playing out. So, like, that's really an indictment on who the people running the organization. They thought they were ready to win now. Look, they're 5-6. Maybe they turn around, but there's just no reason, I think, to believe that it's going to happen. And I think that also everyone was sold on Derek Carr being somewhat the savior of the offense. And the offense is arguably worse than it was in the past. And, that's another indictment of the vision of the organization because this is the direction they chose to go as opposed to maybe trying to find a young quarterback there. So I think there's a lot of reasons for concern. And I think, let's face it, the other big reason is Sean Payton and Drew Brees aren't here anymore. And those were the guys that were the leaders. So who's leading now? Who's the one that's going to give you confidence in the building? And I don't think they find anyone there to kind of really believe in.
Well, I think that goes back to the question about Dennis Allen's job security because, I don't think you can really blame the organization for seeing that window after Tom Brady retires and going all in. And, like I mentioned before, like they have a veteran-laden roster. Like these were productive players in the past. Some of them are still productive. There's talent on this roster. It's just a matter of is your coaching staff equipped to get them? And that's kind of where, if things fall off the rails here, is Dennis Allen in danger, or do they just, sack Pete Carmichael and try to blame it on him and then bring in someone new next year on the offense and try and patch it that way? But the fact that this has kind of happened 2 seasons in a row now where a lot of the problems are the same, that's why people are pointing the finger at Dennis Allen, and I think that's why it should be realistic to talk about his job, but I just don't know, like you said, Jeff, whether the organization will actually do that.
Yeah, I mean, Matt, you looked this up. The only time the Saints have ever fired a head coach after less than 3 years, which is what we'd be looking at. This is only Dennis Allen's second season, was Hank Stram in 1978, I believe, 46 years ago. Hank Stram, for those NFL Films fans of 65 toss power trap fame from Super Bowl 4, or Super Bowl 5. But Rod, it's just not something that the Saints do, and I don't think, like, when it comes to the question of are they actually going to fire Dennis Allen, maybe if they were like lost 5 out of 6 to end the season or something, but you're 5-6. Like Jeff said, this is not a disaster. Yeah, it's against a weak schedule and everyone expected better, but firing the coach seems like a step way beyond. That's what the Washington Commanders do, Matt. It's not what the New Orleans Saints do.
Yeah, I think the Saints want to be that stable organization like the Steelers are, and they, try to keep these same guys around. So I think Dennis Allen's job is pretty safe because of the organization he's coaching for. But I do think there's one, and you sort of mentioned it, this team just really, really falls apart down the stretch, and these guys just all of a sudden just quit on them, and they go, 6 games left? Yeah, they only win 1 more game, and stink it up in the dome a couple of times, and fans are like just not showing up anymore. I think that's the scenario I think where you may have to make a change.
And look, that's a great point. This 3-game homestand is going to be, I think, very telling how the fans react. I mean, we've already seen some of it.
Yeah.
Some of the home games already, the booing, that will resonate with the powers that be on Airline Drive. And it can get ugly in the dome, as we've all seen over the years. This 3-game homestand, if it goes south, could be telling for the fate of the future of the not only the offensive coaching staff, but Dennis Allen.
Yeah. And I think you can start seeing some of that this Sunday. If they're coming off a loss that everybody's frustrated with, and they're playing a really good team in Detroit, and I can see this thing going bad Sunday if they don't play better than they did this past Sunday.
Oh, and even if they do, I mean, they're going to have to. They're in like show me mood with the fans. Like they have to show the first time they get stopped in the red zone from a field goal, they could have a 3-0 lead, and people would be booing lustily at that point. And that kind of brings me into what I want to talk about next, and that's the red zone. First, I want to let people know. Don't know if you've got your Christmas tree up, your Christmas lights up. I put the tree up last night. I've got cuts all over my hands from the plastic tree. But if you are still looking for gifts for someone, the holidays are here. No better gift than a championship poster to commemorate what's been a lot of titles the past few years in Louisiana. Individual posters and championship poster sets are all available now and will all arrive in plenty of time before the holidays. Visit store.NOLA.com and use our promo code INSIDER for 15% off your order. That's store.NOLA.com. So the red zone is what I wanted to touch on, because I do think the Saints seem to be trending in the right direction with red zone for a little while there, Matt. They used the jumbo package. They had Taysom playing more. And then they had Sunday, which was the most clear failure in that category of the entire year. But the more I thought about it and rewatched the game, and they never really had a chance to employ those strategies in Taysom, because they would either get a penalty so fast that they'd be facing 1st and 15, 1st and 20, or they would turn the ball over before they would get in a situation to use Taysom, including Taysom himself one time.
I was going to say, Taysom.
Taysom.
I don't know, like, it was such a crazy failure, and people were frustrated with DA saying after the game, oh, it's the turnovers and penalties. That's all it is. No, that's not all it is. Well, I do think specifically Sunday, those two things played a huge role.
Yeah, no, they definitely did. And this was the concern when you brought in Derek Carr. For as much as he can move the ball in the middle of the field and kind of rack up that yardage, he historically has not been a very strong red zone quarterback. And we're seeing it now where, for whatever reason, that just hasn't necessarily gone the way that the Saints have hoped or wanted. And as for solutions, I mean, I do think you may even have to rely on Taysom Hill even more, even though he turned it over with the fumble. I do think kind of using these gimmicky sort of plays, terms of just maybe more screen passes or something like that. I can only watch an end zone fade so many times before I want to rip my hair out, and it feels like this offense has a lot of those. So, it's interesting.
To put it mildly, I mean, not very strong. Derek Carr in the red zone. I mean, historically, he's one of the worst in the league.
But not this bad. This is worse than he has been.
This is worse than he's been, I know. And look, they did use Taysom Hill, like Matt said, and he fumbled. I mean, now it was, in my opinion, both those turnovers were great plays by Jesse Bates. I know everyone's saying, hey, you got to look him off. I mean, Drew Brees probably does look him off, but sometimes you do have to just say, I mean, the guy made a great play. And I think both those were just terrific plays. I mean, Taysom Hill actually had the ball kind of tucked away, and it was a great timing, great play. So, but in and of itself, those two plays do not speak to the trend of the whole season-long trend here. You can't explain away a recurring trend that's happened over and over and then take it beyond this season. I mean, the Saints actually were better in the red zone in the past few years before Derek Carr got here. So I think we can see a correlation. He had red zone problems with the Raiders. The Saints were better in the red zone until the season. Now Derek Carr's having trouble in the red zone. I think it's obviously got to be a Derek Carr issue. Now, how do you address that? If you start taking him out of the game, does that undermine his confidence? And does that send a message not only to the fan base, but to every other player in the building that we don't have confidence in the guy that we went out in the offseason and made our starting quarterback?
Started doing that already. Yeah.
I know. That's the big question. Are they willing to do that, and where does that take you going into next season?
It's 42.5% is their red zone percentage. I believe they were right at 50% last year. That's touchdowns. You could pick out, I mean, we're talking about such a huge issue, Rod, that like the Houston game, the Atlanta game, and really like I think of Jacksonville too, where they had a couple of red zone opportunities off of early Jaguars fumbles and didn't punch it in. Those 3 games, like if you were just a little bit better in the red zone, this team could easily be 8-3 right now, and we're having a completely different conversation.
Yeah, but that's who this team is, and every week, I mean, it's something. Even if it's not the red zone issues, it may be something like we're not really even talking about how bad the run defense was Sunday, but it was bad too. They're just
we'll get there.
Okay, my bad. This team is just so flawed, and I mean, every week you just don't know what's going to happen, but they're going to do something that makes you scratch your head, and I just don't know if it's. I don't think it's going to be fixed. I mean, not this season. This is just who they are, and I know we've been saying that throughout the season. Like, is this who they are? This is who they are.
Yeah. And believe it or not, they are not the worst team in the NFL in red zone. 42.5% is 29th in the NFL. I think the 2 New York teams and Tennessee, I believe, are worse.
Wow, that's great company.
Yeah. That's not who you want to be with if you're talking playoffs. And it doesn't get any easier because they're down probably their top 3 wide receivers Sunday. We don't know for sure. We're recording this Wednesday before the injury report comes out. But we know Michael Thomas is on IR. Rashid Shaheed, Dennis Allen said, look, it's a quad issue. It's probably, these soft tissue issues do not get better in 1 week. And then Chris Olave is a concussion. And typically, skill players don't come back from concussion protocol in 1 week, particularly, Matt, because Chris Olave had a concussion last year, too. And that history makes it an even higher bar to clear to get out of the protocol.
Yeah, and I believe he also had one in college as well. I think this is at least his 3rd concussion. So it is, now you're looking at a group with Lynn Bowden, Marquez Callaway, A.T. Perry, Keith Kirkwood. I think collectively, I looked this up, they have definitely career-wise under 2,000 yards of the 4 of them, and Marquez Callaway is, the bulk of that because he stepped in 21. But and actually, if you look back at the 21 season, I mean, it kind of mirrors that where Michael Thomas was out, Chris Olave wasn't here yet, and they kind of have to go to the woodshed to find some production. And maybe you see more Lynn Bowden reverses and jet sweeps and those sorts of things that they did in Sunday's game. But yeah, it looks pretty bleak right now.
Huge challenge for Pete Carmichael, right? I mean, got to be one of the biggest challenges of his career, trying to manufacture some kind of offensive game plan. I mean, if you watch the game again, once Shaheed and Olave went down in defense of Derek Carr, I mean, there just wasn't a whole lot of guys to throw to down the field.
They still were moving the ball between the 20s.
They were manufacturing it. They were cobbling it together. So I was actually impressed. But once you get to the red zone, the field's compressed, we all know, and it's just more difficult. But there's only so much you can do with guys that can't get separation, even against a bad Falcons secondary. I mean, that's not an elite secondary. They were scrambling. So I don't know how they're going to do it. I mean, I would say the one good encouraging thing is that Detroit's really struggled defensively lately. I mean, they've struggled to stop people. Even the Chicago Bears were able to move the ball against them. So maybe they do have time to put together a game plan knowing that their manpower shortage is what it is. It was much harder in the middle of a game to try and cobble it together than it is now. But there's no doubt. I mean, the defense has – in this instance, the defense, other than Marshawn Lattimore, is relatively healthy. They've got to play to their capability in a game like this. It has to be on their shoulders to keep them in contention.
Cam Jordan, also questionable ankle injury. We'll see what his status is. But, Rodney, you brought up the point of the run defense. So let's move on to that because the steady presence in this team this whole time – in all these bouts of inconsistency and frustration has been the defense. Now the defense is, even against a weak schedule, is down to 12th in the NFL in total defense. I believe they're 25th over the last 3 weeks. And that, like, look, the 3 weeks, you're talking about Tyson Bagent and the Bears, or last 3 games. Tyson Bagent and the Bears, Joshua Dobbs and the Vikings, Desmond Ridder and the Falcons, and they're 25th in the NFL in yardage allowed. This defense, and particularly in the run game, is not doing his job right now.
Yeah, I remember Sunday, Luke was sitting beside me, and the Falcons were putting together that drive at the end, and I was like, I don't know if the Saints are going to ever even get the ball back. And the Falcons go down and kick the field goal that basically seals it. But they just don't have any answers for anything right now. And Ridder had a couple of runs, but, I mean, just Bijan Robinson, and they were just kind of doing what they wanted to do. And to see this defense fall off like they have, because at the beginning of the season, that's all we talked about is, okay, this is who's going to carry this team, and they can't carry the team. And so, yeah, it's a mess right now. And we didn't see this coming. I didn't, at least. I mean, I thought the defense would be the one thing that could hold up regardless. And like Jeff mentioned, that they're not hurt other than Marshawn, but the secondary's been decent. But up front, they're just getting beat in the trenches, and you didn't think that was going to happen with this team.
Yeah, and they're getting takeaways, which has been the saving grace. Without that, this team's really in trouble. But the one problem with the defense last year, Dunk, was the takeaways, and they're getting those, and all of a sudden everything else is kind of broken.
Yeah, they're almost the polar opposite of the Lions. I think the Lions are -6 in giveaway, takeaway, and they've got a really good record. So they're overcoming it, and the Saints are positive in 5-6 against a weak schedule like we've all talked about. So when I rewatched the game, I was really disturbed by what I could consider flat out the effort. I did not see the effort. I mean, it was clear Atlanta wanted that game more. You could see it in the body language of the players. And I think that's another thing that is a source of frustration for fans. There's not a lot of passion out of this team. The sidelines were kind of dead. I mean, there were a few guys getting into it. Jameis is always going to be into it. There's certain guys you can count on, but it just wasn't there. And that was really disturbing coming off a bye week where you should be refreshed. It's your division rival. You know what's at stake. And it just looked like Atlanta wanted that thing more. They did want it more. It was clear. And the defensive line, the front seven, was not attacking. They were getting bullied, like Rod said. And I don't know the answer to that other than just pure effort and will.
And Zach, you talk about the takeaways. I mean, you're taking it away, but you're taking it away and giving it to this offense, which isn't good. So that doesn't
Might
really
get 3 points out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tyrann Mathieu is going to have to return his interceptions for touchdowns to get scores.
Yeah, Matt, anything you see from the defensive line that is fixable scheme-wise, or is it an effort thing like Jeff said, or is it just a problem that's going to continue?
I think it's going to continue. I mean, they brought in Jason Pierre-Paul to hopefully fix it or boost it, and then he went off and signed with Miami this week to their active rosters. So kind of just like a baffling, if you knew Pierre-Paul was going to be in your plans, like at that point it might be more advantageous to sign him to the roster rather than the practice squad so you don't get that poached. But what's concerning for me is it's not just like if you look at the run defense, it wasn't just Bijan Robinson over and over. I mean, he had, I think, 91 yards, but Jonathan Taylor, he gashed him for 95 yards. I don't think they've allowed a 100-yard rusher yet this season, but you factor in, the quarterbacks being successful. Tyler Algiers for the Falcons was pretty, like, it's not just one star player, like, carving up this defense and you can say, oh, well, he played a good game. It's kind of everyone, and everyone's kind of having their turn.
And between David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, the Lions, of course, have a really good two-headed running attack as well. So lots of issues. Saints tried out 5 kickers yesterday. We're told that may just be a precautionary move. Blake Grupe, we're recording this before the injury report, but he did have a groin injury last week.
I noticed his last kickoff in the game was really bad. I don't know if he just mishit it or it was injury related, but maybe that was where the red flag was.
Like,
he kicked 12 times in the game.
Yeah, I was going to say
6 field goals and 6 kickoffs.
It almost sounds like you're saying a joke that he kicked so much he hurt himself, but that is legitimately a huge workload for a kicker in an NFL game. So
yeah, I think it's just precautionary. I mean, they're going to have a ready list ready for him, but that's one area where they have been pretty solid. And look, these injuries are starting to pile up. So this is where you get into, boy, you really had a chance early in the season when you were healthy to build up some collateral in the one loss, because now you're really faced with some challenges and there's no margin for error because you've squandered some games earlier this season. So I think that's another source of angst for fans.
yeah, no equity. Speaking of which, Saints Insiders brought to you by Bank Plus. Check them out. That's going to do it for us today. That'll lead us into Friday's podcast, a preview of Saints Lions. This 3-game homestand, kind of the Saints Waterloo, guys. They're going to have to make a stand here and save this season if it's going to be saved. So they got the Lions on Sunday, followed by the Panthers and the Giants. That'll lead us up into Christmas week. So we shall see. Saints are home for the holidays. They got to get some wins. For Jeff Duncan, Matthew Parrish, Rod Walker, I'm Zach Ewing. Robert Young's behind the glass. We appreciate him, and we appreciate you watching. We'll see you on Friday.